Well, there are 9 candidates on November's ballot, and 4 of them met the polling requirements for last night's debate. Mary Sheffield, Reverend Solomon Kinloch, James Craig, and Saunteel Jenkins all took the stage at Wayne State last night. The 4 were chosen by recent polling done by the Glengarriff Group. We asked Detroiters who plans to vote in the primary, who they would choose right now. Anyone who got 6% of the vote above qualified. All 4 candidates took that stage last night to dig into what their vision is for the city. Crime, drugs, and guns were one of the top concerns we heard in the polling. And to help break down last night's debate, I'm sitting with 3 people right here. Orlando Bailey, the Executive Director of Outlier Media, Portia Roberson, the CEO of Focus Hope, and Sheila Cockrel, CEO of Citizen Detroit. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning. I guess let's just start here. Your initial takeaways from last night. Personally, I was expecting a little more fire in some bellies.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that I expected them to try to drive down on policy because we haven't heard enough of that. And I think right now they're trying to appeal to those voters who they know are listening for more. But I did expect that there would be a little bit more rumbling, I guess, between candidates because we are in, about 3-4 weeks away from absentee ballots going out. And so if you're going to make a mark, these are the times to make it right now. Yeah,
Orlando, you had mentioned when you were on Flashpoint a few days ago that you were looking for some actionable items, some real policy.
Yeah.
Did you hear any of it?
A little bit. We heard some of the candidates talk a little bit about how they would want to pare down on the property tax and figure out other revenues for the city because the property tax revenue is a significant piece of revenue, but it's also a small piece of revenue. The biggest revenues we get are from income tax and our gaming tax on the casinos. And so I enjoyed hearing, Saunteel Jenkins talk about a penny tax or Mary Sheffield talk about a half-penny tax. It shows that they are thinking about it and be moving beyond the platitudes that we've been hearing in the primary season.
Yeah. Sheila, we were curious if there was going to be any teaming up on maybe Mary Sheffield because she's leading the polls. I didn't see any of that. It seemed like it was every man for himself out there or woman for himself out there.
I think that's right. It seemed to be, first of all, I think the structure of having to come up with a serious policy discussion in 1 minute or 90 seconds
very difficult.
Is very hard to do. I mean, this is even smaller than soundbite.
Right.
And so I think I have to give everybody the opportunity to to have some grace about the fact that you can't say a whole lot. So Orlando's point, I think, is well taken. I just think it was. There were not a lot of fireworks. Personally, I think fireworks, by definition, make for less real engagement as opposed to more. So I'm not unhappy. I know, but that's why.
But you don't get policy out of it.
Right, I know. But I just don't think.
It's a political reality, and I love what you're saying about the time, but I have to posit that if I were up there, I would have had Jason cut me off every single time. I would have run all of my time out and tried to go overtime to get my point across. James Craig could have used that strategy a lot. He got cut off a lot before he was even able to make a point.
We actually saw a lot of comments about that, the fact that it seemed to take him a while to get going, probably 10 or 15 seconds, which when you have 60 is a lot of time.
Yes.
Right.
It's a lot of time.
Right.
I mean, he liked to talk about how happy he was to get a question or that was a good question. It's like, you don't need to tell people that it's a good question. Jason knows it's a good question. You need to move on and get out an answer.
Speaking of questions, one portion of the debate, there were targeted questions towards every single candidate. Let's take a listen to that for a moment.
You have said you would still run your church and preach on Sundays if you're elected mayor. How can you do both effectively when most agree that being mayor is a 24/7 job?
Well, let me be clear. I will be a full-time mayor 2.0. But I understand leadership because you can be an executive and not be a leader, but you can't be a leader and not be an executive. One of the things that I understand is how to build teams. A church that's 105 years old cannot be ran and operated by one person alone. It takes a team of people. Just like I cannot pastor alone, I would not be the mayor alone. You have a deputy mayor, you have a chief of staff, you have chief operating officer, you have department heads. I will be a full-time mayor, but I will be a mayor that will go to church on Sunday, and when he goes to church on Sunday, he will preach. What's wrong with a mayor that has a Christian conscience?
Ms. Jenkins, this question is for you. The last time you were elected to city council, you resigned just a year into your term. Why should voters trust you're going to be totally committed this time if you're elected mayor?
Because I've been totally committed to Detroit my entire life. I was at the city council table during the bankruptcy. My last day at council, we announced that we were exiting the bankruptcy, and then I went to do something very similar to what our current mayor did when he left the prosecutor's office early. I went to be a CEO at an organization that was helping vulnerable families, very much like the one I grew up in. I know what it feels like to live in a house with no heat and no water. And I've been able to help our most vulnerable citizens across the city over the last 10 years. We provided more than $100 million in assistance to the most vulnerable families, and I'm very proud of that fact. In addition, I am even more prepared today for this moment in our city's history. Thank you.
Mr. Craig, for you, in a recent poll that we've talked about, we know we've talked about it tonight, Detroit primary voters saying crime is one of their top concerns. But they also, in that same poll, say they view you more unfavorably than any of the other 8 candidates in this race. What do you say to the voters who think someone other than the former police chief is the one to improve crime in the city?
Well, you know, I appreciate you asking me the question, and I'm going to tell you why. When I was the Detroit police chief and the deputy mayor, at one point, Mayor Duggan called me in the office and said, you know, you got a 75% approval rating. Politicians would crave for that. Let me just say it simply. I'm going to talk about the elephant in the room. I'm a Detroiter first. Yes, I'm a conservative. I was a conservative Democrat, and now I'm a Republican. Unfavorability comes down to one thing: partisan, partisan, partisan. What makes me different now? I was effective as your police chief, and I was a Republican. Nothing changes. I got the job done, and so I understand the concern that some folks have. My commitment is I will lead like I did as the police chief, and as your mayor, I will do the same thing without partisan politics. It doesn't work. And by the way, every city I've worked and led in.
Time. Ms. Sheffield, for you, you've been criticized for missing committee meetings on city council. As many as 90% of the planning and economic development standing meetings over the last 3 years. How can voters trust that you'll be committed to the job as mayor when your recent record suggests otherwise?
So I think it's unfortunate that whoever published that article took that route. And this is what happens when you have no substance, you have no record, and no policy to run on. I'm an ex officio member of every committee as the council president. I preside over the formal session, which I chair on Tuesdays. And so no sitting council president goes to every single committee because you're ex officio of them all. So it's a false report. And again, this is what we go back to in politics when you don't have substance, when you don't have a record, and you're not sure what you're running on. I think Detroiters prefer to hear about my plan and vision, what I've done for Detroit. Now, let me be clear. We have not done everything right. And I've done as much as I can as a city council president to move this city forward. And we're going to build on that foundation that we've laid to ensure that everyone in this city benefits from the growth of Detroit.
All right, so walking away from those individual pointed questions, what are the moments that you take out of that and say, okay, I see that, or I don't see that?
I see that James Craig has a problem with time because he got called time quite
Sure,
a bit.
multiple times.
You know, I think that, again, as Sheila said, I think people were trying to get out some policy conversations that are hard to do in such a short span of time. But I do think that they touched on some issues that were really important that voters want to hear about, especially those of us who sort of dabble in this world all the time. I think that's the interesting thing about a debate, though, is that people are trying to talk to different types of voters. So there's a little bit of the fireworks for people who really lean into that and wanted to see that, particularly wanted to see that from Saunteel, because that is the thing that I've heard the most, is that she's spot on with policy and how to run the city, but they're worried about the energy around running the city. So I think she tried to lean into that a little bit more.
Okay.
Well, I think each of the people handled the question in their own, the one pointed question in their own manner. I think that believe that Saunteel and Mary did the best job overall, and answering those questions, responding in those questions.
Yeah, Orlando?
You know, I think that the base, the support base for each of the candidates were happy with how each candidate answered the question. I think that Kinloch is getting advice that this messaging for him is working about being pastor and still being the mayor at the same time.
Stick with that
And he's
messaging?
sticking with that messaging.
Do you think that landed?
I think it landed with his base. I don't think it's landing with people who are questioning the integrity of that, right? I don't think the messaging is as effective enough, or maybe he didn't have enough time to fully explain what that makeup would look like. But, you know, a quick Facebook scan, a quick Instagram scan, the Kinloch supporters are happy with his answer. The Sheffield supporters are happy with her answer. The
But
Jenkins
we're not
camp,
going after our supporters anymore.
Yeah.
We're trying to get those undecideds. At this
Exactly. And I'm not certain if those folks who were undecided have a new candidate that they're putting their support behind.
We've got about a minute left before break. Do we think that anybody won some undecideds last night?
I think Saunteel might have won some undecideds last night. I think she really came out. She was strong throughout, and then she sort of lobbed as they say, the shots were fired at the end. I didn't really think it was a shot. I think, this is politics, and somebody's got to say something.
Right.
But I think she picked up probably a few undecideds last night.
Yeah.
Well, I think more importantly, the people who don't even pay attention to the fact that there's an election are the people that everybody should be addressing, because everybody, basically, it's people who pay attention are inside a political beltway in the city,
Right.
and so that's
all
a
inside
small
baseball,
group,
yeah.
right? And so let's go to the people who
10
aren't
seconds.
paying.
Any undecideds?
No, I
No?
don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to come back. We're going to look at the discussion on crime that we had yesterday, and we'll listen to all the closing statements. We can hear those fireworks, or maybe lack thereof, when we come back.